Hansel and Gretel were twins. This meant they shared everything. They shared toys over the years, they shared clothes when they could, and for a long time they shared a bedroom. They shared other things too, however, things that were less fun. They shared the brunt of their parents' stress, and they shared looks as their parents pored over bills and forms over the table that they did not understand. And their parents shared that burden. One day, they shared a trip into the woods, following their father. "It will be fun," he said. "A nice day out." So they set off. Gretel brought some sweets along to keep them going, the wrappers carelessly flying out of her pocket and littering the path as they happily skipped into the woods. After walking what felt like an eternity, the fun began fading away. "Are we almost there?" Hansel asked. "My feet are tired," Gretel said. "Very nearly," their father said. "Keep up." The world around them was growing dark as the trees closed in. They were deep into the forest behind their home, further than they had ever been. They began to grow scared, clinging to each other quietly as they moved through the woods. This had become far from the fun day out their father had promised. "Wait here," he said. "I'll be back soon." But something inside Hansel and Gretel told them their father hadn't just brought them out into the woods for a fun day out. Something inside them both said he would not be coming back to collect them. They waited and waited and waited, but their father didn't return. Hansel began to cry, realising that their father might never be coming back. "Don't cry, Hansel," Gretel said. "He'll be back soon, I'm sure." And that was when she noticed a sweet wrapper on the ground. Out of the corner of her eye, she walked over and picked it up. This was one of hers. It must have fallen out of her pocket as they were walking deeper and deeper into the forest. "Hansel!" she shouted. "Hansel, have a look at this!" "It's from one of your sweets," replied Hansel, the tears being replaced by a look of pure joy. "And if there's one wrapper," replied Gretel, "there's sure to be more." "The trail could guide us home," exclaimed Hansel, getting more and more excited with each passing sound. "There's only one way to find out," replied Gretel. With that, the twins made their way back through the forest, retracing their steps with the help of the sweet wrappers strewn along the path. But all of a sudden, the trail of sweet wrappers stopped. The twins looked around them, desperately searching for the next in the trail of wrappers that would guide them home. "Not lost, I hope, my dears?" came a voice which at once sounded like silken nails against metal. Good and bad, tempting and dangerous. The twins turned to see an old woman looking at them, hunched over, but friendly looking nonetheless. "We were, and then we weren't, and now I think we might be again," said Hansel. "I tell you what," replied the old woman. "Why don't you come back to my cottage to use my phone?" The twins looked at each other excitedly. This could be their chance to escape the woods. They could call their mother to pick them up, and this horrible nightmare would all be over. "On one condition," said the woman. "You will have to help me with my housework." "Housework?" exclaimed Hansel. If there's one thing he couldn't bear, it was housework. "We'd love to," replied Gretel. "Excellent. Follow me," said the old woman. They followed the old woman through the forest, completely losing any sense of direction. Finally, they arrived at her cottage. "Come on, children, let's go inside." They followed the old woman into the house, where she instructed Hansel to clean the oven and Gretel to take out the trash. Hansel reluctantly made his way over to the oven. It was much bigger than any he'd ever seen before. He leaned inside to scrub the walls but couldn't reach the back corners. Oh dear, it's much easier if you climb inside. You'll never reach those top corners otherwise. Gretel wasn't paying any attention to the other conversation. Something else had sparked her interest. Something inside the bin. That's right, the old woman said. You climb right on in there, child. But Gretel was still not listening. She was inspecting what seemed to be handfuls of sweet wrappers inside the bin. The same sweet wrappers her and Hansel had been using to retrace their steps. Was this some strange coincidence, or was it something much more sinister? Had the old woman taken the wrappers, and with them any chance of the twins getting home? Had she tricked them into entering her cottage? Gretel spun round, just in time to see Hansel beginning to climb into the oven. "Hansel, no!" Gretel shouted, as she watched the old woman flick the switch that turned on the oven. She was going to cook Hansel! Gretel ran across the room, pulling Hansel down from the mouth of the oven, feeling the heat as she did so. "Hansel, oh Hansel, she was going to cook you!" Gretel shouted, clinging to her brother gratefully. "Oh, you misunderstand me, dear," replied the old woman with a grin on her face. "I wasn't going to cook your brother. I was going to cook you both." With that, the old woman made a grab for them. She was strangely strong for an old lady, but she was no match for the two children who were managing to overpower her. "Hansel, the oven!" Gretel shouted. And with that, the children pushed the old woman as hard as they could. They pushed and pushed and pushed. The woman pushed back, feeling the heat from the oven against her back. But it was useless. She fell, tumbling into the fiery abyss of the oven. The twins grabbed the heavy door, slamming it shut. They leaned with their backs against the oven door, keeping it closed. "Hansel," Gretel said, relief filling her voice. "I thought you were a goner for sure." "Gretel, you saved me," said Hansel, and with that the twins hugged. They held each other for what felt like hours until their nerves finally settled. "Let's try the phone," Hansel said, after some time. "Good idea," Gretel said. She stood up, made her way across the room and picked up the mobile phone from the desk in the corner. It looked like something that belonged in a museum. After working out how to get it unlocked, she typed in her parents' phone number and pressed the big green phone button. But nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing. No signal. They were too deep in the woods. Alice in Wonderland. Alice was bored. She was bored so often nowadays. Her sister always had her nose in her phone or face hidden in a computer, clicking away on the screen. On that sunny afternoon where they spent their mandatory time together, as their mother insisted, sitting in the backyard in the summer sun, it was quiet, except for the dings of her sister's phone and her giggles as she read the messages from her friends. Alice quietly wished for friends of her own to giggle at too, but all she had was the sun and the clouds and a tiny white rabbit she'd seen many times in the corner of the yard. He was there now, sniffing the air. She was sure once or twice he was looking at her. His eyes seemed to actually see her. It wasn't the blank stare her mother and sister gave the TV screen every night. Today was no different. The rabbit was watching her. She watched him back as her sister's phone dinged some more and she snorted at the screen. The rabbit was sniffing in her direction, tilting his head. She stood up. She walked towards him, and she watched him hop away and behind the old oak tree that had been in the backyard since her grandmother planted it as a little girl. She stepped around and saw the rabbit gone, a hole at the base of the tree replacing him. She tilted to look down, turning her head and sniffing the air as the rabbit had. She leaned more, chasing the faint smell of chocolate and sweets and the sound of her name. She was sure she heard it. Alice! Alice! That was her. They were asking for her. And then she was tumbling down, down, down. But it felt like flying. She was so happy she didn't have a phone to distract her that afternoon. When she landed, she was staring at a bottle that said, "Drink me." A blue caterpillar that was watching her from a plume of smoke, and a smiling cat. The house seemed for someone far larger, far taller than her. She was like a mouse scurrying on the ground in comparison. She thought of the mouse who lived in her kitchen last summer. "Alice," the cat hummed with a grin like a razor. "Alice indeed," the caterpillar said as well, huffing out smoke from his small, puckered mouth. There was a crash of broken glass at the door. Then another and another. Alice turned and walked to the door that seemed all at once far too large. But a smaller door was available to her at the base of the door that seemed like it was for a giant. She pushed it open. Everything outside was normal-sized, but it was the only thing normal about it. The plants were purple and the sky was a shining sapphire. The grass was greener than she ever could have imagined. "We've been waiting for you," called a voice. She turned to see a man dressed in bright orange, hat stacked up and up upon his head, reaching for the sky. There was a taller, thinner rabbit with him. A hare. She recognised him from a book. Tossing cups at the door she walked through. Tea was flowing from so many kettles, it seemed to be pouring in a waterfall off the table. "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" the man in the hats asked. "It's been puzzling me all day long." "A raven and a writing desk?" she echoed back. "I just can't find the answer." "Have you tried looking it up?" "Look up?" The man in the hats and his companion looked up. They squinted at the sunny sky and turned their head back down to her. "Nothing up there," he said, pouring more tea into an overflowing cup. "No, looking it up, searching it, on the computer." "On the what?" the hare asked. "The web." "Spider web?" The man in the hats and the hare laughed together loudly and obnoxiously, spilling more tea. "No answers there. It's somewhere in here," the man in the hat said, tapping her head. She frowned and backed away as they broke out into more and more laughter, spilling tea in an overflow over the green grass like a tiny tidal wave. She walked on, looking for the white rabbit she'd followed down. She was sure he'd been the one calling her name. As she walked on, she heard more noise and saw the strangest sight of cards of every suit, spades and clovers, red and black, marching around a castle yard. She watched as they danced around like soldiers. A Queen of Hearts card was standing above them with a pouting, haughty face. She stepped up to the gate, pushing slightly, and gave, allowing her in as the cards continued in their formation. And then she saw him. The rabbit was there, below them all, curled into a corner. "White Rabbit," she whispered, following after him. He hopped away the closer she got, disappearing out of a hole in the wall too small for her to go through. "And who is this?" the Queen card called out, pointing at Alice. She froze. She felt like that day in Mrs. Corcoran's maths class when she was caught daydreaming out the window. Her heart pounded the same way. Her face went red the same way. What a strange place it was, where everything was the same but so incredibly different. "I'm Alice," she said. "You are trespassing." "I didn't mean to. I'm a bit lost. Have you a map?" "A map?" "An address. I'm looking for a white rabbit." "No white rabbits here. You have trespassed on a queen. The sentence for that is death." Queens don't have that power anymore. It's the 21st century.
How dare you! Off with her head!
The cards swarmed at her. She felt herself back up and up until the solid wall was at her back and she had nowhere to go. She closed her eyes, squeezing them tightly shut as the cards were upon her. Then she was awake, back in the sun of her own backyard. "Are you all right, Alice?" her sister asked, phone out of her hand as she looked at her with more attention and concern than she'd given her in years. "Yes, a strange dream, I think. We could look up what it means. There's an app for dream symbols and interpretation." Alice looked over to see a flash of a white, fluffy tail in the corner of the yard. "I'm all right. I think I know," she said, smiling to herself at her own secret.